over 80% of your time is spent communicating, which is hard to believe because I don't know when people are having time to do work. They're internally going, well, what's the work that we're going to do? And are we sure that this is the right work? And how are we going to get that work done? And does everyone agree that that's the work that we should do? And we did some work, and how did that go? And well, we need to package up the work to sell it to other people in the company. And we all know how this goes.
Nailed it.
What we do find is that when we look at the other employees in the company who are using us, most of them are not going to be customer facing. So what we're not going to help those people because those conversations aren't customer facing. It's crazy.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to welcome Lena Waters, Chief Marketing Officer for Grammarly. Grammarly, most of you, if you don't know, you will definitely know by the end of this conversation, but this is a company and a brand that was founded in 2009. It's number 7 on the Forbes Cloud 100. It's one of Time's 100 most influential companies, one of Fast Company's most innovative companies in AI, which we'll definitely talk about today. And it's one of Inc.'s best workplaces to wrap it up. Now, don't forget that we're talking Grammarly being there from the very early days of AI. They've been leveraging AI early in the game. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lena Waters. Thank you for being on the show, Lena. How are you today?
Great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you. You're up to some big stuff over there. I want to just get a pulse check right now on kind of what's in your purview. What are you focused on? What are you noticing at Grammarly? Noticing broadly in your sector? Tell us what's kind of on your plate right now. What's on Lena Waters' plate?
Well, I've been Chief Marketing Officer here for about 8 months, and it's a newly created role. So the company has had a lot of product-led growth in the past. And newer is Grammarly being more present at work. We're actually at 96% of the Fortune 500 have Grammarly users. And so this long background of Grammarly being for students and for individuals has really turned into Grammarly for professionals who are bringing us into the workplace. And so this concept of taking a 15-year-old brand that people know and love and trust and that their kids use is now enterprise ready and being rolled out across large companies, and growing and expanding and maintaining that brand across multiple different audiences is a really interesting challenge as we think about providing value to a lot of different kinds of customers.
I want to click into the enterprise ready part now because I remember early days Grammarly when Grammarly first got on the scene for me just as a user. I was like, how it was so cutting edge. Like no one had a tool that I had experienced like that, and it was changing the way I wrote and emailed and did all the things. And of course, there's this enterprise application now at a global level. What's that approach and process like coming into this very well-known, consumer brand and saying, okay, we can also go bigger in enterprise? What kind of goes into getting it enterprise ready? And is there a lot of thought that goes into that from a product and a go-to-market, or was it already positioned to go there anyway?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Jeremy, and it's a great question. There's really two things. I think one, Grammarly is always focused on the individual end user. And everything that we do really keeps the customer in mind. And I know a lot of companies say that. But what's interesting is that an individual and someone in the enterprise is using the same product. They might be using us as a group, and they might be using a paid version rather than a free version. But the functionality that you have access to that you're using as a paid user extends across different use cases. And so one of the things that we really focus on is it's great if an enterprise and a team uses us, but we have to be developing and delivering value to the customer every day with all of their usage. And if you really focus on that as the pillar, a lot of the growth has really come from there. And people have found that thing that I was using to help me write better in school becomes the thing that helps me become better as a professional when I want to communicate, which naturally then in turn helps groups of people communicate and achieve objectives together. And so it's been a very natural progression. I think it's one of the great examples of the classic product-led growth, in that the product is really helping people grow as individuals. And in return, those individuals are taking us into workplaces, and that grows the company. So there's a great flywheel that happens there.
Your content is at the heart of what you do. It connects your company to others, teaches them, guides them, and inspires them. But creating, managing, and accelerating content creation is often chaotic and difficult. Empower your content teams with Brightspot Content Management System, made specifically for marketers and corporate communications leaders. No more waiting for a developer to have to piece things together. Put the power to create and deliver digital experiences into the hands of your marketers with a comprehensive suite of ready-to-use tools and functionality. Bring a bright spot to your tech stack with the Brightspot Content Management System. Visit brightspot.com/marketing trends today. Are you partnering with like users, kind of like Trojan horse, like you're a user, you use the tool, but you also work at Google or wherever you work? Like, do you have strategy and campaigns that do things like that? How are you kind of approaching the enterprise and saying, hey, we've been here, we're ready for you, here's the different use cases? What's some of that? Unpack some of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you can tell where someone works, assuming that they're using their corporate address. It allows the salespeople and the customer success reps to have a really great view into, well, maybe a small team in customer success in a large company is using us, and there's a paid enterprise license there. But there could be hundreds of people across the company that are using us, and so that creates a more interesting conversation. And if we put on our B2B hat for a second, there's always that new logo business that you go in, you land a small deal, you turn it over to customer success, and there's the land and expand, and you look for the next use cases, and you try and really expand that footprint across the business. It's funny because the users actually bring Grammarly in. And so we're one of the most requested programs to be used within an enterprise. And so the security and the enablement of having a really safe, secure ability to have enterprises roll that out, to have the control and the visibility and the compliance that they need. We started baking that into the product very early on just to really enable that to happen. So it's very seamless for people to go from being an individual user, maybe they're expensing it, maybe they're using their personal account, to then flip over and start having a truly enterprise experience. And the great thing about it, as you know, if you've used Grammarly, it's just there and it's in every surface that you're in. It's in every text box that you're in. It's naturally kind of unobtrusive in the background, but it's there to help when you're ready. And so the implementation time is literally one day. There's no real onboarding. It just happens.
How are you and the team navigating this kind of the saturation of AI writing assistants, right? There's just, literally so many tools. I look at the GPT store, I look at, all these different, utility, AI writing assistant tools out there, super noisy. What's your approach? What's your opinion there? How do you navigate that? And what are some of the things that Grammarly's actually employed to stand out, right? And still capture new segments, but also, continue to take relationship with the existing customers as well.
Yeah, it's a really noisy space right now. Everywhere you turn, on one hand, everybody knows that it's noisy and you have to talk about AI. On the other hand, AI is happening to a lot of companies and people. And so, I would argue that I wouldn't say so much it's saturated. I'd say that we're at this very, early phase. Are we still at the peak of inflated expectations? Are we down, in the dip? Hard to say, right? It's a whole new world out there. What's going to happen, I think, and it's tough to make a forecast around AI, but AI is going to happen in every tool and every platform and every company to some sort of extent, and it's just going to have to be baked into everything. What's interesting is that you see a lot of players putting AI into their own ecosystems and then wanting customers to come into their ecosystems to use yet another AI tool. And so that proliferation of AI really means lots of AI in lots of tools. What really sets Grammarly apart and why we continue to see growth and success, really, no matter who comes into the market, is that this ubiquity that we have. You could be in any operating system. We're in the browser. You could be in the app. It's a plugin. It's just sort of there. It means that we are enabling you across any workspace that you're in, and you don't have to pop out to something else. There's no cutting. There's no pasting. We are offering you that help no matter what you're using, which means that we're very OS agnostic. We're very platform agnostic. So while all these different systems have to go and create AI within their own tool, the question becomes in the future, how many of these are you really going to want to use? What's that horizontal layer that exists across everything? Because we are, in theory, trying to make your work stream more simplified and more valuable, not to give you, an even greater proliferation of tools to have to use. And so I think that simplicity of Grammarly is also really its strength, and that's helped us really stand out.
So interesting. And as you mentioned earlier, you talked about this really being your first year there. You're coming up on your first year there. You have an excellent and interesting history in marketing and leadership. What are you, in terms of metrics right now, paying attention to in the first year, right? Is there a difference in what you're focusing on now, given everything you just shared, state of the industry, state of the business coming up on year one? I always find it interesting to kind of see where you're kind of focused at, what you're thinking of in the first year. What are you really paying attention to in your role right now at this stage of the game?
First year hopefully isn't that different than year 2 or year 5, in that I think that there's always this balance that has to happen between what marketers call top of the funnel and bottom of the funnel. So there's this concept that, all of this marketing technology that we have, this big marketing stack that we have, it's really created this expectation for marketers that you can spend $1, refresh a dashboard, see what the result was. We've created that dependency within marketing. We've created that expectation with our stakeholders and our CEOs that everything should be knowable. And that's very noble. It's really taken marketing further and given us a real seat at the table from a revenue perspective. The thing that tends to get neglected, and the thing that I'm trying to make sure that we really balance out, particularly at Grammarly, where the brand is evolving, that awareness that you're building, that intent that you're growing, that affinity for the brand, that's really where the table's getting set. Most buyers come to a purchase decision with a day one set of providers. Over 80% of them do that. Over 90% of them buy from that day one set of providers. So if you're not creating that brand, that expectation, that affinity early on, those performance programs that are happening later on, they may work for people who are already in the market, but you're not creating the market. And so, as we expand our product portfolio, as we start to provide value for new audiences, it's really important that we balance that early experience with the performance and the efficiency of the later experience. So there's always a little bit of that two-handed piece. And as the Grammarly brand evolves, really important that we focus on both. So specifically, are people aware that Grammarly is actually an AI provider that is used at work and delivers value beyond what people have traditionally known us for over the last 15 years? And then are we productively really growing that revenue across both our self-serve business and our enterprise business? And how does that whole life cycle connect together? So it's very much a two-sided proposition.
Where along the, you talk about top of funnel, middle funnel, end of funnel, you got to continue to create a lot of demand, obviously, and continue to drive growth. But as a CMO and as the executive, when do you choose to kind of parachute into either one of those, right? Whether it's top of funnel or end of funnel, what are some of the indicators that say, okay, wait, I need to kind of double click into this, have a conversation with a leader or a team, or is it just that you trust that leader and that team to do it and you don't really assess the strategy or make much shift, or maybe it's the end of the funnel? How do you assess where you're going to be jumping in and supporting the folks that are creating and executing the strategy that you're setting?
How do you know when to grab the wheel?
yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
If at all, right?
If at all, right? So, the first answer is don't. If you put great leaders in teams and you create great leverage, ideally, you want to help people succeed, but you also have to allow people to learn from their failures. And I think that there's this temptation to say, I'm only going to pay attention to the red spots in the business, or I'm going to look for that specific metric that's bad, or how come this curve isn't going up? I think it's important to support areas of success as much as it's important to try and mitigate areas of failure or where things aren't going well. And, we have a sort of a strong operational rhythm at Grammarly where we are continually, as you can imagine, looking at numbers long-term, looking at numbers short-term, what's the right cadence for both sides of the business. As we think through those customer journeys, there's sort of breakpoints that you look at, that we formulaically know very well. And so those are all important. I think what happens is there a reason to think that something is changing in the macro environment with the ecosystem? And should we do something about it or not? That's always a tricky decision to know when to engage. Mm-hmm. Is there something happening with our internal operations that says, what's the quality and quantity of what we're doing? So I think having that realistic knowledge of things that you can control and things that you can't control, and really starting top down from there, and then understanding where to dive in. And sometimes you're pushing on a result from the business. Sometimes you're supporting a person. And I think it's important to know the difference between when you need to do both.
It's so interesting, because it's like the balance. It's like you're of course going to trust, the folks that are around you. And there's also, like, for you being the one, it's like the accountability kind of ultimately falls on you, right? In terms of, hey, if this doesn't work, sure, the team is going to feel some of that potentially, but ultimately it's like you're the one having to kind of explain some of this stuff, right, to the ELT and stakeholders. So it's got to be such an interesting balance of, like, wanting to coach and cultivate the team and letting them experience, like you said, what's it like to fail. And that's really important. And we don't want to crash the car into the side of the road either, right? And so that part of how you ride that wave and as executive is fascinating.
I think what you're doing as a leader is you're really providing a different level of altitude is really how I think about it. And you're providing context. So, it's important to remember as you rise up through the ranks to the top, and you're an executive. What happens is that, one, people tell you fewer things. And two, they're highly sanitized. They finish your 7 rounds before they get to you. So, when people talk about things like, talk to the person who's closest to the cliff face that has the tool in their hands, like, I mean, that's really what that means. It's, have 7 people really edited this statement before it came to me? And do I really know what's going on? So that's important to think through. What's my level of altitude, and what am I being told versus what am I going to find out? And it's why executives love to look at dashboards. It's great to understand the executive summary. Let me see the data and what's really going on. The other piece of that is the context. Somebody who's managing their personal and professional accountability with their results and their specific channel doesn't always have a context into what's happening throughout the rest of the business. They might not also have context into what's happening with this customer at other parts of their journey. And the reality is, you end up working with a lot of very, type A, very driven people. They're very conscious of their results. Sometimes what happens is they don't want to call out other areas in the business that might need more help. And so that's really important too, is to, give them that opening of, by the time this customer has gotten to you, what would you want them to understand and know and feel and believe? And is that happening so that your channel can have the most impact on them? Or should other things be happening elsewhere in the customer journey? And maybe they don't want to speak up about it because it seems like blame. And so having that real context, both for the customer and what else is happening in the company, is the value that you need to be able to bring as a leader.
Is that something that is cultivated at Grammarly? If you see something, say something, right? Like, there's something that there's something off there. Is that like a welcome thing? Maybe click into the culture there. Is that something that's encouraged versus, keep this to ourselves? Like, let's look around, let's collaborate. Is there something there?
Yeah. It's really important. We've got these, very, these guiding principles that we bring up all the time. We evaluate people, we interview people, according to these frameworks. Grammarly's full of smart, kind people. What also happens, we've got, as you think about the size of the company now and the arc of growth that we're on, also really important to bring into that company that growth and winning mindset, and to make people feel that, it's okay to question the quality of someone's work. It doesn't mean that you're questioning the quality of their character. And that, these conversations, everyone needs to be brave and say the thing that needs to be said. Make sure that there isn't an elephant in the room, and everybody bears that responsibility to make sure that happens. One, so that you're highlighting the context that everybody needs, but two, so that you're keeping that element of transparency and frankness alive within the company. At the end of the day, you're better off saying it. It helps the whole company move faster, and it's just a better place to work.
I also get a sense, Lena, that there's also this instinct that you have too. There's also this kind of, experience and perspective you have just being in the game of business, being in the game of marketing, being in the game of growth. And there's also this very real thing called data and metrics. And there's a scoreboard that we all look at as businesses and brands. And there's also just, hey, my name is Lena, and you got to trust me with the ball. And there's instinct, and there's something that I can't, there's this intangible, right? I can't always show you the qualitative or the quantitative thing, right? But there's this hunch that I have. How much does that play into your just day-to-day as an executive? Are you drawing from that at all? Do you have those moments where it maybe on paper doesn't fit with the strategy. You know what I mean? Like, and this is just an instinct. This is just my gut feeling.
Well, I'm a marketer, so there's a left brain, right brain thing going on all the time, right? We're going to pay attention to the dashboard. And then you have to have the gut of, decades of experience behind you that says, when do we pay attention to the dashboard? When do we say, hey, it's something else going on, right? So there's a reason why it's an art and a science. There's an interesting sort of structure that this reminds me of, you're thinking about, again, putting the customer at the heart of how you're making these decisions. An individual person is going to think through their own set of criteria when they make a decision. A group of people is sort of complexified by they're going to think through their own personal sets of criteria. And then there's the dynamic of humans working together in groups. And you have to understand that that's what's happening in the market. And especially on the B2B side, there are conversations happening between groups of humans where you're not in the room and you don't know what they're saying. So the thought that you can look at a dashboard and say, well, I'm sure this white paper is why we drove these opportunities, or I'm sure that these leads from the trade show us that this is successful. Those things are true. And you do have to optimize towards those. But then you also have to start to take into account what stories are they telling each other? What do each individual personas believe? And how are they using that to drive that decision forward? And that's where a little bit of the gut and the experience comes in, so that you can also understand what's happening behind the scenes. And that gives you the fuller picture that the dashboard's not going to tell you. Everyone has access to dashboards. Everyone at every company, all your competitors, they're all looking at data. That's not the thing that's just going to help them win. That's why putting together the best teams is really the most important thing.
Has ABM become a strategy in the kind of B2B side for Grammarly?
Yes. It's a more of a growing method that we have there. It's a big growth lever. We are seeing a lot of growth on the enterprise side. People come to Grammarly, they know that they want us, they're buying us, and they'll buy us right away for departments or teams. Going wall to wall within an entire enterprise company, obviously, that takes more of an ABM motion. And so we start to see that where, really futuristic companies are starting to do that across the organization. But, people need help when they're making decisions. And as you think through value and you think through, where do you put your next dollar for investments, and how do you invest in the world of AI, and how do you enable your employees to become great futuristic workers? How do you make your company more productive? There's a lot of education that's needed. And so sometimes, ABM gets thought about in terms of how do we do better demand gen? But you're also really, your job as a company is you should be teaching companies something about their business that they didn't already know. And that's really your job as a provider. And ABM helps you do that because you're really getting to know those individual personas and what those roles care about and what those functions are responsible to deliver. And you're acknowledging the pressures that they have within their set of cross-functional partners. And you're speaking to them in that reality and helping them with that decision. That's why a champion is always so important in ABM. What you're really saying is who really knows what's what in that company and how this decision-making process is going to go. It's important to win the deals, but it's also important that you have a leader there who's helping educate the company about the possibilities of things that could be done. And sometimes that message happens better when employees within the company are having that conversation. They don't always want to hear from the vendor. So that enablement is really important.
Can you share a success, maybe not mentioning brands or customers specifically, but can you share a successful ABM, story that worked well?
Yeah. We see individual teams coming in for certain different functions, and generally, the use case, which makes sense, at first glance, is customer-facing employees who are having conversations with customers. Those external conversations are more valuable. And so, we'll see a customer success team or a marketing team or support team come in and license Grammarly because those conversations are important. So we want to invest there. What we do find is that when we look at the other employees in the company who are using us, most of them are not going to be customer facing. And we've done work with the Harris Poll recently that shows that, over 80% of your time is spent communicating which is
Wow.
hard to believe because I don't know when people are having time to do work.
Yeah,
That
good
means,
question.
right? They're internally going, well, what's the work that we're going to do? And are we sure that this is the right work? And how are we going to get that work
Wow.
done? And does everyone agree that that's the work that we should do? And we did some work, and how did that go? And well, we need to package up the work to sell it to other people in the company.
So
And
true.
we all know
Wow.
how this
Nailed
goes,
it.
right?
Nailed it.
So what, we're not going to help those people because those conversations aren't customer facing? It's crazy. So when you think about the value of the internal communications, what you're really saying is the way that people are spending most of their time, regardless of their function, is important enough that you've decided that you need an employee in that role. Why aren't you going to care how they're spending most of their time? And so, ABM has brought us the ability to storytell within an organization where you can validate. Here's the value that we see for certain kinds of communications. Doesn't it make sense that you want every conversation to be measurably more valuable while you're at work? And that's a hard proposition to say no to.
This idea of internal and external communication, right? And the importance of why communication in general is a key factor when it comes to organizational success. In your view, why? Why is it so crucial?
Communication is a strategic imperative. It's how your business runs. It's how customers engage with your brand. The research that we've done that I mentioned says that this is how your employees are spending over 80% of your time. What's fascinating to me, it's one of the key value propositions of Grammarly. It's why I joined. I'm fascinated by this idea. Obviously, communication is really important to me as a marketer. But if this is what everybody's doing in the company, it's the prerequisite for every job. There's a bullet point in every job description: excellent verbal and written communication skills. There's really no executive that's responsible for making sure that everybody's great at communication. There's no measurement. There's no tests that you take. There's no KPI in a dashboard that says, are we communicating efficiently as an organization? It kind of gets thrown into comms and brand, and marketing sort of carries the water on this, but there's a lot of communicating that people are doing within a company that has nothing to do with marketing. And the idea that there isn't assistance or a platform or something that is helping your employees do better the thing that they're doing for almost their entire day, that's a crazy idea to me. And so, if you start to think about this wonderful future that we're all embarking on with generative AI, we are going to see lots of different AI capabilities in every tool that you use, and they're going to be churning out more and more content. It's more important than ever that people are thinking how they make their own communication better, because we're already facing a huge plethora of content, some of which is questionable. And the ability to be understood in an even noisier environment couldn't be more important. And that's really where we come in.
It's such a beautiful angle to think about how Grammarly is going to serve the world, right? It's like, what a stat, by the way, 80%. That's just incredible. And it's incredible. And everyone knows that's true. Everyone knows that that's real, is we spend so much of our time just communicating. And so you think about the flag that Grammarly is planting of like, hey, we are that resource. We are there before, during, and after, right? To be your communication, tool and advocate to ensure that you are communicating at the top of your game, whether it's an email or text or whatever, however you're using the tool. And so what a beautiful way to like zoom out and say, we got this. And that's just amazing. Well, I want to get into just kind of who you are and what makes you, Lena, because I get a sense of there's a lot that makes you up. And I know we'll never get to it in 20 minutes, but I get a sense of just someone who, like I said earlier, has a real dance with instinct and gut, but also strategy, and also an ability to lead and lead a strategy and build trust with the team and the other leaders. And I love that. But now I want to kind of figure out how you are the way you are. And I want to understand that, because that's the goal to me. And so as you think about you talked about first principles earlier, and I love that. But what is a personal value or a principle that you carry with you in your professional life and your life day to day?
Oh, what's the meaning of life? Is that what we're asking?
Let's go there.
The thing that drives me forward, I want the world to be organized and beautiful. And those are two hard concepts because they don't always go together. And I find that the ikigai concept, right? If that's where we're going with that, the things that I care about are the ability to connect dots and to pattern match in an ever more confusing, noisy world with a lot of technology. It's overwhelming for a lot of people. And, if you get to the right altitude, there's a simplicity that you can continue to bring to things. And I think that's a really important capability to have as a human. I think it's also a really important thing to bring to the table as a leader. The ability to create reason out of chaos and to give everybody a North Star and to take these portfolios of humans and qualities and skills and expertise and knowledge that you have and shape that into something that can be used to create growth or a successful company or a brand or just a valuable experience for a customer. It's even trickier to do. You notice it a lot in marketing, more content, more technology, more data, more complexity. It's not a surprise to me that you see these shortening tenures for CMOs because you see this arc that happens. Your development arc as a leader and the development arc as a company for any employee, they only intersect for a short amount of time. And the more complex your role gets, the more that you're asked to do, finding that right understanding within a company, it might not happen or it might happen for a short time. So that ability to really bring that organization and marshal together resources and form a clear path, that's hard-won experience. And on the beautiful side, I would say that moment of clarity that you can help provide, that value, that aha moment that you can provide as a leader with your team or as a company to a customer, providing that value that they're not getting somewhere else, that really makes a difference in helping them accomplish their goals. That's why we're all doing what we're doing.
Amazing. I really value that. And again, it's just a testament to kind of how you're able to ride the wave, considering all of the people internally, the amazing customers externally, and you really having to navigate. And I find that, your role is one of the most fascinating in the ELT, especially in 2024, the CMO, the marketing executive. It's so interesting I just find that they're really good ones, like you said, right brain, left brain, balancing it really well, and just being real with people as they grow, and drive change. I know you've been in the game a long time and there might be many examples here, but what comes to you when I ask, can you share a vulnerable moment that you felt vulnerable in your career? And, what did you learn about yourself from that experience?
Oh, yeah. You remember these moments like they were yesterday. I'll tell you a little bit of a story. This is a long time ago. I was managing a team and we were all very proud because we had automated an experience and created lots of efficiencies, and we're very eager to show it off. And of course, the human review process sort of fell down a little bit. And long story short, we ended up sending out a massive amount of emails while we were at a partner event to all of our joint customers, and we used the wrong partner name. We used the name of a partner event that we had been at a few weeks previously. And so it's this, ultimate cringe moment. And I think two things that happened. One, the personal accountability that you have to immediately take for a failure is really important. It doesn't matter why it happened or what your mitigation plan is or how you're going to fix something. What matters in that moment is that immediate ability to take accountability. And the second thing, as I was falling on my sword in front of my executive, was the grace that executive showed me, where he knew that I was punishing myself, in a far greater way than he ever could. And I remember that moment always. And so now when I tell my team, look, if I don't see you messing up on a fairly regular basis, I'm going to know that you're not trying new things. And if you don't try new things, we're not going to grow. And developing growth levers is what we do as leaders. And this just means sometimes that we're going to mess up. And what I'm looking for in that moment is for them to take that personal accountability. Sure, we want an explanation and we want a debrief and all the rest of that. But that accountability means a lot because it means that you are taking credit for the failures as well as those successes. And that balance is really important. And the second thing is I try and show them the same grace in that moment knowing that they are already going to feel bad about it. And it's a really important moment where you have to create that environment to allow people to experiment. And you learn just as much, if not more, from your failures than you do from your successes. And both of those things are important.
How do you take accountability when you're working with Rahul, right, the CEO? How do you take personal accountability as a CMO on the ELT? How do you do it with the CEO of the business?
The ability to tell truth in the moment with bravery and without flinching and putting your personal emotions aside. We all have emotions, right? We've all got that we walk around with this anxiety. We seem to love it, and we keep coming back for more, right? So you have to acknowledge that we all feel anxious about these things, and you have to kind of separate yourself from it and really be able to evaluate what's really going on here. In any ELT meeting, there's a person in the room who has a certain set of experiences and knows a certain amount of things and cares a lot about something and has opinions. And you have to be able to sort those things out. And I think the way to sort of, take accountability and build credibility and trust really with your team members is to understand where is the moment where I want to sort of, grab the wheel and say, I've got this. There's a challenge that we have. I'm taking accountability for this. I own this result. And, as you build trust with your team, that becomes a pretty quick conversation. And then there's those moments where you also have to own up and say, hey, there's a huge area here where I'm not sure about this. Either, we don't have enough people in the building who know how to do this. It's a new motion for the company. And so we have to acknowledge the change management that comes along with that and the expectations and the education where we need to get people caught up so that we've got that feeling of alignment and trust. We're not moving too fast. And then and knowing what you're going to do. And so you can be accountable for an effort where you're not really sure of success, but you're going to own it and try. It's just really important to be clear about how well you think you're set up and to have that humility to be able to ask for help where you need it. And sometimes that's a little bit different from saying, I've got this, I've done this 100 times, I know the variation that will apply here. You can trust me to go and accomplish this result, and we have very little risk. And I think if you can be clear about those situations and you're not always telling one story versus the other, but it should be a little bit of blend, that's how you build that trust in order to be able to do different things. And that's what enables the team to move faster. And, it's what makes it more fun. We talk a lot about, doing this kind of a job. We are playing a sport at a really high level. This is the Olympics, and winning is good. Winning is way better than losing.
That's right.
And so,
that's right.
It's painful and there's practice and there's winning and losing, but this is the expectation of the team. We are all fortunate to be doing these things in a pretty world-class environment. And that's the kind of level of expectation that you have. And athletes and Olympians, they're not great at everything all the time. They have things that they work on, but they're very clear about those things. And they have a trainer and they have a coach and they have a plan and they work these things out. Why don't we treat it like that as professionals? So just be very honest about where we're good and where we're not. You're sort of doing a SWOT analysis on yourself all the time and sharing those results in others. And it takes a little bit of bravery to be able to do that.
Where did you first start learning, or who got your attention in that? Maybe it was a CMO. What was the early days of, like, you saw an executive that you liked how they built trust, how they communicated, their ways of being? Was there someone, maybe they were a mentor, maybe they're just someone that you watched in the boardroom, but clearly you've been in these rooms, you've had these conversations, you've seen these conversations, but I'm curious about where it started for you. Was there a mentor? Was there a CMO that said, hey, Lena, I'm going to show you how we do it? Was there that experience for you where you really started to cultivate your own?
I don't think I've ever had a single or handful of mentors. I think I've always had a personal board of advisors. People that I turn to and say, you're really great at this particular thing. I'm going to watch and learn. I think that there's a portfolio of skills that you put together. I would say that I try and learn something. Sometimes it's a positive thing and sometimes it's a negative thing of what not to do. Or sometimes it's a thing of, this works really well for you. I couldn't own that. That's not the approach that I'm going to take. I can see why you do that. So I think, again, it's that understanding of, you have a little bit of a map of what you want to accomplish, and you have a packing list of the things that you need to put in your bag that you're going to take with you on this journey. Some of the things don't work for everybody. And I think that assessment of knowing what are these tactics and techniques of things that are going to work for you. I have a lot of admiration for different leaders that I've worked with. There are jobs that they have or assignments they've taken on that I don't want any part of. And then there are other things where I go, oh, that's what I want to do. And I think the ability to surround yourself with really diverse kinds of people who don't do things the way that you do them or do things that you don't agree with, they're really important to do. I think, if you're always drawn to a certain type of leader or a certain methodology, you get that tunnel vision. And I think it limits your diversity. And if you believe that the world is going to keep changing, you have to keep adding people to your personal board of advisors that are going to continue to push yourself and go, well, maybe I wasn't ready to do this 10 years ago, but now I am. So, how am I going to add this to my portfolio? And is this an area that I'm going to develop? It's never too late to learn a new trick.
Can you talk about the archetypes of who would be on the personal board of advisors? Like, who are these, not who by name, but who are these types of people that you want on your personal board of advisors? I really like that.
Yeah. The personas that you have, right?
Yeah. The personas.
Yeah. I think you've got this, I think the really brash, go for it leader where, act first, think later. Not my favorite way of acting, but you have to admire kind of the aggressiveness and the instinct and the lead with the gut that happens. I think there's the sort of careful consideration of I'm going to think through and chess move all certain maps of these things before I know how risk averse do I want to be. And then I think everything else on that is sort of the packaging of how you do it. But I think through my actions as how risk averse am I versus how much appetite do I have? There's lots of models out there for this. Am I going to skew too far in one direction in any kind of particular situation? And should I be taking a hard look at doing things very differently? What would those two archetypes do? That's kind of the spectrum that I work across. And then once you decide how you're going to take that action, then the question is, well, am I making people feel comfortable and giving context with something that is maybe risky? Or am I spending a lot of time explaining to people why we shouldn't do a thing? And so you're sort of always operating on one of those two pillars.
Is there any misconception that people might have of you as a leader? And how do you address or challenge that?
Because I have this portfolio in my head and I'm always thinking through this chessboard of certain people with certain skill sets who can make certain moves and help us win together as a team. I think from the outside, it can look like I can change my mind at the drop of a hat. We had this plan, we're going to do this thing. I got a new data point. We've got a new idea, or there's something that we haven't considered, or I haven't been looking at the problem through the right altitude and I needed to go closer into the details or higher up and get perspective. And every day, every week on every project, I think I'm constantly continuing to learn. I don't believe in this concept that you write down a project plan and then you execute it as written. I think that there's this ability to, be MacGyvering your way into success as you go. And, that's why it's important that you have a good layer of leaders who can help you flex in those ways. Do we need more data, or do we just need to decide that we're never going to know the right answer and we should just go? I think that, the more space there is between me as a leader and the people, at the rock face with their hands on keyboards doing it, it can feel like changes in direction. But the reality is that it's a dynamic plan in a changing industry with a group of humans, and the very nature of the game is change. I'm very comfortable with that. I need to always make sure that I communicate with my team and bring them along and they understand the context for why we're doing it and how we're doing it.
How many changes have you made this week? It's Thursday.
What day is it? Thursday?
Thursday.
Yeah.
Has there been many?
Probably more. Maybe more than people would know, and maybe I've made changes in my head that they don't know about yet. But yeah,
okay.
it's a dynamic world.
Okay. Now, this is what I am curious about with you, and I don't have a sense of this because the story that I make up about you is that there's like a big part of you that just loves this world and doesn't ever turn that part of your brain off, and you could always go there, and you're probably up in the middle of the night or up early in the morning, and just you could go there. Or do you find ways to like really disconnect, and do you really just leave the marketing and business world, and what does that look like? Or is this is my world, I don't want to ever turn it off, and I'm just living and breathing being a marketing leader at Grammarly? Or is it something different?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I had a dream last night about doing this podcast today with you. So
Okay.
it's just that the conscious and the subconscious brain are always working on these things all the time. I could be laying on the beach somewhere, and it's like, oh, I have this thought, I have to put it into my phone. So that does happen. I try really hard though to have moments in my day and week and month where I'm completely off, and I'm with family, and the phone goes down, and we're not checking things. But yeah, I've been known to pick up my phone when I'm on vacation and jot a thought down. I think the trick to everyone's got their own way of disengaging and relaxing. I like to be completely on, completely off, and then I like to give myself some grace in those moments of maybe I'm going to do a family call or an appointment in the middle of the workday. Maybe it's a weekend, and I need to release the valve, and I need to sit down and crank out an hour and get some thoughts down to sort of relieve that pressure so that I can go back to relaxing again. I think it's just important to give yourself that grace and know that it's a blend of things. But yeah, it's white space is important. It gives you room and time for when things are busy. And I think knowing yourself and doing it guilt free, you have to know where your off switch is.
It's huge. Yeah, I talk to so many, CMOs, and everyone has a different, background and perspective, and everyone has a different experience as to how they got to the seat of CMO. And it seems like, to your point, the tenure is getting even shorter. And I've had so many execs come on the show. They're no longer, at the brands that they were there. They're no longer there now. They were there. And so there's this high stakes environment that exists in the world of a CMO. And there's also this real need of like cultivating empathy and compassion in a high stakes environment. Can you touch on how you do that? How and where empathy made a difference today?
Well, you need to be well rested, like your previous question. I forget which one of the James Bond books says, he says, rest is a weapon. And, you have to think about, you can handle pretty much anything if you've got some sort of a balanced sensibility. So I think that, taking care of yourself first is really, put your own oxygen mask on first, as they always say. That's really important, because then you're well equipped to come to work and support others. You have to remember that these are groups of humans trying to accomplish things together, and everyone's coming at it from a different aspect. And we're so busy being professional and being driven and being goal oriented that you forget that everyone is just a huge bag of anxiety on the inside, and they're all trying to do the same thing that you're doing. I think once you step outside of yourself and realize that, look, I'm not the only one who's completely freaked out about this. Everyone has these emotions about it. That helps give you some context and some perspective. When you watch like the athlete after game interviews, and they've got those things that they're always saying, and they're so focused, when they're on the field, and then they come out afterwards and they talk a lot about how many emotions that they had, and you never know when they're out there all focused. Everything's the same, and so you have to really, again, give people that grace, that these are hard decisions in a high stakes environment, and everybody wants to do the right thing. When you see that maybe that negative experience, or the way that someone expresses something that isn't quite right, to put yourself in their shoes for a moment, and maybe not escalate the situation, but give them a moment to have their moment where maybe that's not their best moment, and give them a little space, and then, keep going. And I think that ability to sort of, bob and weave and flex a little bit, not take everything too seriously. That's something that we all have to remember to bring to the table.
I'm also very curious, Lena, about like legacy and impact, right? Looking forward, what legacy do you hope to leave behind in the marketing world, right? How do you want to be remembered as a leader and as a person?
I think as a marketer, I want to have an impact on my colleagues where, we are all trying to help the executive team understand how marketing can be used as a strategic weapon. And I think marketing is one of those interesting ideas. CEOs are usually product people or the revenue people. It's very rare that the CMO becomes the CEO. And for that and for a variety of reasons, I would say marketing is one of the most misunderstood functions within the executive team. It is constantly changing. It's always being modernized. It's art, it's data. There are areas of marketing that feel magical, like a black box. And then there are areas that feel very dashboard oriented. And it can be both things at the same time. And that's a lot for people to take in when they're thinking through, are we hitting our sales numbers? Are we shipping product on time? And, like anything else, there is a very first principles approach of everything starts with the audience. And do we understand what they believe and think and know and feel? And are we implementing the right things and making the right investment choices to impact those choices that the customers are making? And it's really not any more complicated than that. And so that the ability, I think, of the CEO to think about marketing from a true go-to-market perspective, I think that's something that I can have a lot of impact on, and it's something that I care a lot about. I think from a personal perspective and from a leadership vantage point, I want people on my team to feel like they have potential and ability, that they've been seen. I want them to leave their time with me, not thinking that that's the end of the relationship. I tell people all the time, like, once you've been on my team, you're always on my team. So, I care about you now, and I care about you in the future. I think it's important to be able to extend that helping hand to people that that's what a network is for. I think people sometimes are very valuable at one company. There's lots of other things that they can do in other roles. And sometimes that's at the company that you're at. And sometimes you help people out in other companies. And all of those things are important. But, once you're part of someone's growth trajectory, I think you have a responsibility for that person. And so it's nice to remain connected. And, I want to be helpful to anyone who's ever been on my team.
Amazing. This has been incredible, Lena, like hearing your insights and hearing your experiences. This is one of those conversations for me that I was paying very close attention, of course, to what you were saying. I was also paying very close attention to what you were not saying and the space in between, like the intentionality with how you are, the way that you talk about the vision of the brand and being a leader, and also being a human, behind the title and behind all the revenue. Really beautifully said. And so this is incredible. Before we wrap, is there any advice or mantra that you want to share with our listeners who are aspiring to make a mark in their career like you?
I would say to anybody at any level, say the hard thing. Everybody already knows that it's out there. Everybody's thinking it in the back of their head. Let go of the fear. It will help your whole team win faster. It'll help you develop as an individual. And if there's something that that you think is valuable that's not being said, that's the value that you're bringing to the table. And if it wasn't hard, then it wouldn't be worth doing. I think that personal bravery that everybody brings to work every day, that's the secret sauce right there. Like, that's where all the good stuff happens. And if everybody gives each other a little bit of grace and allows for some back and forth, those are the things. Everyone, if you've ever left a meeting feeling like things were unsaid, maybe you should take some personal accountability for that. And, it's hard at different levels, understandably. But those things have got to be said. That's where the real insights in a group of humans comes together. And it's hard to do, but it's so rewarding.
Say the hard thing. That might be the title of this episode. That's powerful. Hillary, make a note of that one, please. Lena, how can our listeners connect with you and follow your work?
LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me there. We're always hiring, so we love referrals at Grammarly.
Awesome.
If there's anything I can do to be helpful, that's the best way to reach me.
Cool. Awesome. Lena, thank you so much. This was insightful. I do not think there will be much editing in this conversation, but really, thank you. Shout out to the whole Grammarly squad. We're paying attention. We're rooting for you. And this was an honor. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Brightspot Content Management System enables marketers to launch in just 100 days. It efficiently manages marketing campaigns or updates investors on your corporate site, handling it all seamlessly. With over 100 plus different content types and templates, marketers can deliver a customized, relevant experience to your audience. Additionally, integrate your current marketing automations platform and access instant analytics and SEO recommendations directly from your Brightspot content management system, simplifying tool management. Discover more at brightspot.com grammarly.com/marketing trends.